running like crazy.
Okay, Commissioner Graves?
That's fine.
Okay. Moving to our regular agenda item, I have items 1, 2, and 3. Do we need findings on those as we pass those motions? I did have items 4, 5, and 6 for discussion. And on items 8 and 9, there is a clarification change. On item 8, we would need to change that to section 16, reading Utah's choice of law. And on regular agenda item number 9, we need to change section 13 to Utah's choice of law for clarification points. And then we had a request to table regular agenda item number 14 for additional discussion and closed.
Do we also hold number 13?
Yes.
So
Commissioner Graves?
table 14?
Table 14.
So I don't know what you did on 7.
I didn't have anything on 7.
So consent, okay.
Did you have questions on it? Okay. That means we will be holding for discussion from consent agenda items 3, 4, 5, and 6, the tabling of consent item 12, striking of consent item 16. We will be discussing and holding for discussion regular agenda items number 4, 5, and 6, 13, and a table of regular agenda item 14. Okay. Recognizing all of the other agenda items moved to consent, are there any public comments or questions from items that have been moved to the consent calendar? Seeing none, we will go ahead and proceed forward with consent agenda item number 3.
I thought you were going to move the work session.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Well, we did have one thing, anticipating significant public comment. We had a work session at the end that was a report on an activity. Are those individuals here? We would actually at this time invite you, as long as the other two commissioners sound okay with that, to come and make your presentation to save you from waiting through the whole meeting. And this particular report is on the 15th annual Fun Run event that was held on September 9th. Typically, we ask entities that we give exemptions for to come back and report, and we certainly appreciate you taking the time to do that. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate you letting us come and present. I'm Sandra Curcio. I'm the Director of Ability First Utah. Our 15th annual Run Rock and Roll is a fundraiser that we host every year to support our programs. Our race was a successful race this year. We were able to profit some funding from the race. We used that funding to be able to support our programs. We have a youth program that we work with youth with disabilities, ages 17 to 24 years of age, to help them to gain the necessary skills to be able to transition from school into independent living and then also into employment. And so those programs that we host a lot of classes, in skills classes, independent living skills classes on a weekly basis for 3 different school districts that we work with, Alpine, Nebo, and Provo school districts, kids that we work at the schools as well as we work at the center. They'll have classes that teach them how to budget, how to actually take care of their self-care needs, as well as cooking classes and things that we do there at the center for them. And so our fundraiser basically supports those programs, and we put all of the money that we raised from the fundraiser back into our programs to support them. And so we really appreciate the commission in supporting us each year, and we're grateful for the public in supporting our program, because without them we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And so we wanted to thank you again for your support. And we have some packets here of some information that's more about our center. It gives an idea of some of the services that we provide. We have many, many different programs, and so we wanted to share that with you. And thank you again for the opportunity that you give us to be able to host our annual event each year. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you very much. Again, thank you for coming in and reporting as well. And the work that you do in our community is greatly appreciated. Okay, we will now go ahead and move back to consent agenda item number 3.
Morning. Heather Lewis with Prevention and Treatment.
Couple questions, and these, if I could talk about 3 and 4, since they're similar. Are they connected, or is 3 an amendment for 2017?
3 is an amendment for 2017. It ties in with this other one, number 4 also. But basically, the amendment just said that R&R Media and Utah County are excluded from any liability, that it would fall solely on the installers of the media campaign.
Okay.
And that's been signed
So
by their side.
Part of my question was, if this was just solely for 2017, you kind of answered my question saying that it also goes into 2018. Because my concern was that we're doing something that's already been done. It's in the
Right.
past. It was 2017, so I didn't understand why it was, we were amending an agreement that it was already over with.
And we got 2 grants, and so the second contract is for another grant disbursement, and so we wanted to have the amendment continue with the insurance liability. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
That totally makes sense now.
Okay.
Second, and you're on number 4, if I can bounce to that one, there is no account listed under that one. It is an expense, but there's no account that is listed on there where it's coming out of, and so do you know what account that is coming out of?
Gosh, I would have to ask our finance officer. I'm not sure on that.
We got a couple of those that it looks like. The next one has the same question. So, and then also as I read down through the contract, the agreement has in there that this is for 2018, but it has in the agreement that the agreement is for December 1st, 2017. Does that need to change?
I don't think it needs to change. It's just that's when we started the contract process, and we knew that installation wasn't going to happen until 2018. It was set to begin this month in January. So we started the contract, but if we need to change it, we can, but that's just when we had started it. So not anticipating that we would do work in 2017, just that's when we started the contract process.
Because in our contract, usually we say it doesn't become effective till like 15 days. I can't remember the days. 15 days after it's been adopted by the commission. But yet in the
Okay.
agreement it says that we're starting in December 1st, 2017, and so that just looks
Okay.
strange to me.
That
when
makes
I-
sense.
when I
I'll
read
keep
it.
that in mind for the next one, because I wasn't aware of that.
Okay, Dave, do we need to change anything with that, or are we fine with that?
I think it's okay the way it's written, because
It is a process.
it's just a retroactive date, but I think we could do that.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
On the account, though,
Yeah, I was just going to say, if Heather, you can just have Robert Johnson just forward those account numbers for those agreements to our office,
Okay.
to me, and then we'll verify funding. The substance abuse is really good about that, but we just want to verify that they have identified the right account numbers.
And when you said, are you talking about number 5 as well? When
number
you
5, that's the only question I have on number 5 is where are we getting the money from? What
Okay,
account?
and we'll answer that and get back with you then.
Yeah, so just have Robert.
Okay,
Okay.
all right.
Pat Bird, Department of Drug and Alcohol. Number 5 is coming from CDBG monies, a grant. And we obviously need to do the same within the accounting aspect, but that's where that money's coming from.
Yeah.
We do have a agreement with them right now that was in place in 2017.
I just look to see the end number on there is all, usually when I read down through these, if it's the expense.
Okay. I'll talk with Robert about those and get that over.
Okay.
Any additional?
Well, I'll make a motion then. I'll make a motion that we approve and authorize, it looks like they're all through the same, the commission chair to sign the agreements as stated in number 3, 4, and 5, as stated on our regular agenda.
Did you want to stipulate the account numbers being?
Yeah, let's, with the subsequent account numbers being given to the accounting office so we can get that in line. That'd be great.
Second.
Okay, I've got a motion and a second to approve and authorize consent agenda items number 3, 4, and 5 with specific direction to identify account numbers to our clerk auditor's office. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Motion carries 3-0. All right, we'll now move to consent agenda item number 6.
So on a retention policy, the county has, we haven't adopted a retention policy of our own, so therefore by default, we follow the state's retention policy. I was wondering, first off, do your grants require a certain written retention policy to apply for them? Because I see a retention policy here, and I'll just continue. I don't see a necessity for us to look at a retention policy if we follow the state's retention policy when it comes to documents.
Richard Nance, Department of Drug and Alcohol Prevention and Treatment. This is, follows along with the contract we have for the Department of Human Services. It requires us to adopt this record retention policy. So I don't know what the state one is. There may be some kind of general record retention policy, but by contract, we have to maintain adult records for this period of time and then youth records for the same period after the youth that was in treatment turns age 21. So that's specifically called out in our Department of Human Services contract. That's why we've put this policy together.
And so it has to be something that we recognize in a commission meeting. I don't understand why, if we recognize the state's retention policy, why we even have to recognize it again. Or is it different? Is this one different than the state's retention policy?
Yeah, I couldn't tell you. Maybe Ben knows.
That's my confusion. If we're recognizing the state's and this one's different than the state's retention policy, should we be looking at the entire county's retention policy?
From my, Ben Van Noy, County Attorney's Office, from my review, it is the same as the state's. So it is redundant to a sense. As far as the necessity to approve, like Richard Nance mentioned, the Department of Health Human Services requires us to have a policy, but if the policy is to rely on the states, because they're the same in terms of substance, I guess it wouldn't be necessary to adopt a separate resolution. So
It would be necessary?
it would not.
Oh,
Yeah.
so we could strike this and Richard could just sign it and move forward?
I think we could.
Okay. I'll make a motion that we strike number,
Do we need to have a specification that we're following the states anywhere for your contractual obligations? But,
I don't think so.
okay. Just want to make sure we're safe. It is redundant, but
yeah.
don't want to get in trouble anywhere.
Because I know that the name at the bottom of this one here, the sign off on it is you. Yeah.
And we have a large number of internal policies and procedures. This kind of
Sure.
just directs the work for the
Sure.
staff that maintain the records. So it's kind of more of an internal working policy, but we always bring these to you for approval.
Given that we have adopted the state's retention policy, I personally don't see it necessary that we need to go through and approve since we've already adopted the state's retention policy. Therefore, I would make a motion that we strike number 6 on our agenda.
Even though it's not part of the motion, knowing that Richard's going to sign it and implement it because it's redundant.
Right, yes.
Second.
Okay. I have a motion and a second to strike consent agenda item number 6. All those in favor say aye.
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 Will carry 3-0. Okay, we've tabled consent agenda item number 12 and stricken consent agenda item number 16. We'll now be moving into our regular agenda. Yes,
I mean, I
Richard?
had number 7 circled as well, that you wanted to talk about, disagreement. I just missed that.
I didn't have any
Didn't have any.
questions on it, but
Right.
if you have some comments you'd like to
Oh,
make
no.
on it, you're welcome to.
I'm happy not to say a word. Thank you.
Okay, yeah, I didn't have any on that. Okay, we'll now be moving into our regular agenda items. First up in our regular agenda will be regular agenda item number 4. This is to adopt or deny an ordinance to amend the Utah County General Plan 2014 and adopt Section 5-18 of the Utah County Land Use Ordinance to adopt a grazing zone. This particular agenda item was continued from last week's regular meeting. Last week we had a very good discussion on this particular item and had some staff report and significant public comment. To start off with, I would bring it back up here to the table. Are there any other additional thoughts or comments on this item?
There are some. I personally would like to hear from the public. I have heard from the public from last session on the reasons why to adopt this. And just for the public's information, I am inclined to do so. And so I don't know if it's necessary to have the same speak that way. If there are some that are opposed to it, I mean, I think I have not heard that voice yet, and it would be maybe beneficial to listen to that as well. But I just wanted to kind of signal that out there.
Okay. Given that we don't seem to have a lot of discussion here, I would open it for public comment. We would ask, again, for you to come to the podium, state your name for the record, and if we have significant comment, we would like to ask you to keep it to around 2 minutes to keep the meeting moving in an orderly manner. We're not going to punch the time clock on you, but we'll ask for that. And at this time, we will open it for general public comment. And again, this is, for clarification, this is a discussion on adopting an ordinance that would have a grazing zone in Utah County. This would affect all of Utah County. This particular zone could be put into place anywhere in the county. And obviously, our next agenda item is putting it in place in an area that has been identified. But the comments on this particular agenda item would be in regards to adopting the actual zone itself, looking at the fact it could be implemented anywhere in the county. And with that, we'll open it for public comment.
So I guess Bryson Hinkins, Lakeshore. So I might be one of the guys that are opposed to this. Have a list of some reasons why. I won't get into the mining part. I'll talk about that in item 5. As far as the concrete and asphalt plants go and taking that out, I guess I don't understand why that would be taken out in the grazing zone when, I mean, that's kind of where I would think you'd want the batch plants and asphalt plants. I mean, we have batch plants and asphalt plants that are within 500 feet of a residential area within city limits, but the closest one that's in the county is the Staker Parson asphalt plant that's 1,800 feet away to the nearest home. The next one is Kilgore on West Mountain that's about 3,200 feet away to the nearest home. And then there's places where there's, they're 500 feet. Some of the confusions that I have of it is they're trying to protect the grazing with this, at least that's what I'm understanding it as, is they're trying to protect the grazing rights, but getting away with the mining, sand and gravel, all those things, but they're allowing racetracks still in the zone, which is taking up grazing area. It's causing dust, it's causing noise. The shooting range, I mean, I love shooting ranges, I think they're great, but now you need a buffered zone that's gonna take out the area for grazing, and I mean, that's just taking up area. You can't excavate a pit, but you can still excavate a lake and a pond. I mean, that's taking up area for grazing. You're still allowing commercial dog kennels to go in these areas when, I mean, back in 2012, there was a pack of dogs that killed 18 sheep on West Mountain. Some of the major concerns are the fish hatcheries. I mean, I think that's going to cause a huge ripple effect, no pun intended, but going down to other areas for mining and grazing, it's just going to allow somebody to go in and change the zone to grazing and no longer allow fish hatcheries. but they'll allow mink farms still, and dairies, and feedlots, but no fish hatcheries. You're still going to allow electrical power generation plants, but not a batch plant. I mean, I feel like that's a huge footprint and a lot more EPA regulated than batch plant. Still allowing oil and gas wells and pipelines to go through all these grazing areas. That doesn't make any sense to me. No helicopter pads and, you know, flight runways, things like that in these areas. But you can still have other fire and police, emergency service vehicles. Some of the future development issues I think are that we'll see down the line in the future is when someone's trying to permit a landfill, another mining and grazing zone, someone can throw up their arms and say, well, no, we need to zone this for grazing, and now you can't have landfills on that area. You can't have correctional institutions. I mean, if they want to put a prison out in the desert in Utah County, someone will just throw up their arms and say, no, let's zone this for grazing. And nursing homes. I mean, why you can't have nursing homes? And like, where else are they going to put an explosion to build like dynamite and explosive facilities if you can't have it in the mining and grazing area, or in the grazing area? Because that's where they need to be, is out in the middle of nowhere. Am I wrong? Do you want a explosion facility where they're building dynamite next to you, within a mile of your home? Because that's where the nearest one is a mile away at Pelican Point, to the nearest home. And if it's, I don't know. I mean, I think this amendment is just looking for an excuse to, it's not looking out for grazing, in my opinion. It's just trying to stop mining. And I think we're going to see the future where it's, you know, it's just trying to keep these areas from mining operations, fish hatcheries, landfills, and all the other things I mentioned. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners. I appreciate all the work that you've done to make this zoning change possible. My name's Debbie Brozovich. I live in Payson, Utah. Utah County codes and ordinances are important to protect our community. An example of this is DOGM will not approve a mining permit that is not in compliance with Utah County code and land ordinances. The BLM will not lease land for mining until the DOGM permit has been approved. Therefore, they will be in compliance with the county codes and land ordinances. I don't believe that Kilgore Asphalt Plant would be on West Mountain as it is now if our community had seen the tiny ad published in the newspaper that no one subscribes to in 2008. We weren't there. It was up to our elected representatives to protect our health and safety. They let us down. They removed conditional use that had been required for asphalt and cement plants on mining and grazing ordinances, without following through and creating or revising ordinances as commission meeting minutes shows was discussed. This left our community's health and safety unprotected. Our community is experiencing being woken up by backup alarms at 5 a.m. The 3-mile buffer between mining and homes is gone. Fruit farms and agricultural productions jeopardized. Private well owners are on their own to protect their wells. Mining and asphalt plants are allowed to work night and day, and the sound decibel of 70 is ridiculous to be allowed near family homes. The list goes on and on. Our representatives chose to disregard our health and safety and enrich the county and mining industries at our expense. We've been working to make our representatives aware of the conflicting rights we have with the mining industry. Commissioner Ivey drafted an ordinance that would have helped protect our health, safety, and property values, the largest investment most of us make in our lives. But after our commissioners negotiated amongst themselves, the ordinance was passed it was whittled down so much that it has no teeth and it will be difficult to enforce. DOGM agrees with our concerns about our health and safety, but the DOGM only regulates how mining will be done, where it will be done, and how the land will be reclaimed. The DOGM does not have the authority to regulate outside these perimeters. They are limited to making suggestions that the mine operator may choose to voluntarily work with the community to resolve. It's our county commissioner's responsibility to have ordinances in place to protect our health and safety. Maricopa, like Utah County, are in a non-attainment area. The rule of thumb used is that for every 1 acre of land graded, 1,000 gallons of water is needed for dust suppression. Kilgore's expansion allows 84 acres to be disturbed. Based on 240 operational days, 62 acre-feet of water are needed. Kilgore has 15 acre-feet of water. They would need an additional 46.7 acre-feet of water. They would need to truck in 10,400,000 gallons of water a year. That would require 1,042 trips of 10,000 gallons. If the 14,000 acres remains permitted and are mined based on the rule of thumb, it would require 14 acre-feet of water, 14,000 acre-feet of water, and that is over 4.5 billion gallons of water just to suppress the dust. Where is this much water going to come from without negative impact to our community? DOGM does not have jurisdiction to dictate how much water mining operations must have to control dust. Our community wells are already going dry in times of drought. When discussing this with the Utah Water Rights, I learned they cannot protect our water. It's impossible to prove what hasn't
Debbie,
happened.
if you could kind of work on wrapping it up, we're running close to your time. I don't mean to push you. I appreciate your comments, but I want to try and be equitable and fair.
Okay. Well, we appreciate your working with us for over 4 years. If the zoning change on West Mountain is not approved to allow protection of our resources and the management of the growth of mining operations, you failed us.
Thank you.
Hello and good morning. I appreciate you letting me be here.
Could you just state your name for the record, please?
Mary Hogue. I live in West Mountain. And I'm for the zoning change for grazing. And I haven't spoke, but I've sent in paperwork and things to help. The view from my front door is a sight to behold. And I've looked out there for 30 years in West Mountain, and I'm very aware of my surroundings. There's been a disturbance going on out there that I'm aware of, that we're out of balance. It makes me feel threatened for my family's health and safety. There's so much good going on from this. We have a common cause. Let's not remain short-sighted and repeat past mistakes that harm us with unintended consequences. Help us. We have nowhere else to turn. After all this time, we are asking you to change the zoning for our best interest, and it is in your hands. As a wife, as a mother, and a great-grandmother, as a taxpayer, I say these things to you this day, and thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Todd Cusick. I live in Provo, and I've built for you a time machine just so you can see what the future is. And if you'll look at that, what you have is a view from the property that I own if you were out in the water of Utah Lake looking directly due east. The pink dots are the CMC-owned property, which I represent. The black dots are the BLM property adjacent to my property, and the orange are the Sitla property. And in a moment I'll come up and use those screws and show you what it'll look like in 20 years if you go forward with this. CMC owns about 500 acres on West Mountain. About of the 10,000 acres that you're talking about, I think about 80+% of it is BLM ground. The BLM and the state have both registered their opposition to this. In fact, I think I should read, just for the benefit of those here, a letter that you received from the BLM. The BLM managed lands in West Mountain are currently open for sellable sand and gravel, leasable oil and gas, and locatable hard rock mining, mineral extraction. Currently, there are a few sand and gravel operations on BLM managed lands on West Mountains, and the BLM has received inquiries about permitting additional operations. The BLM strives to be as consistent as possible with county and state ordinances. If the county does approve this rezoning proposal, it is important to note that the BLM managed land will continue to be open for mineral extractions, and future proposals for mineral extraction on BLM managed lands on West Mountain would still be considered. With the proposed zoning change, we anticipate that it may not be possible for the BLM to be consistent with the county zoning. In this scenario, the BLM would make every effort to consider the county's interests while also maintaining our multiple use responsibilities as required by several federal laws. I think it speaks for itself. A moment ago, there were some comments made about the BLM and the DOGM and the BLM and how they work together, and I don't have time to explain, but they're factually incorrect, what you heard. The sand and gravel operation that we have does not need DOGM approval. It's been waived already.
Can I jump in there and ask you a few questions as you're going, or would you like to just give it?
You want me to, however you want to do it.
Whatever you prefer.
Okay. Go ahead and ask your question, and then we'll.
I had conversations with BLM representative on this issue this last week, because I want to get it more clear in my mind exactly what this letter means. And you're right when it comes to the sand and gravel part, but the hard rock part still has to go through Dogma.
Correct.
And so that one, so the hard rock mining portion of it is not the same as the sand and gravel in the way of that it would necessarily go forward.
That is a very good distinction to be made. In some sense, it may not have a lot of differences, but I'm happy to meet with you and explain why later. But the limestone that is on that hill would go through DOGM. The rest of the minerals and the ones I'm talking about would not, and has already been waived.
Yeah, and I was going to bring this up in 5, and I maybe will as well on that. Part of the problem that we're facing on the county side is that we don't have impact fees like you do have in cities, where there's significant impacts that go on. As long as it's permitted, it can happen. And I mean, yeah, we do have bonding and so forth for roads or for mitigation afterwards, but we don't have the ability or the tool. We have never incorporated an impact fee. And so I talked with the BLM director, and I said, if we have all these sand and gravel trucks out there on a regular basis, there's going to be impact. There's impact to the community and to the neighboring infrastructure and everything that's going on there. How in the world do we offset that? How do we?
That is an excellent point, and that's what I'm leading
okay,
to right
keep going
here.
then.
Okay?
We'll get to
and
some
in
more
fact, you do have
conversation.
an impact fee. You're looking at it, and let me give you an idea of the math associated with that impact fee. On my property is concrete sand. The nearest concrete sand, anyone here can correct me, from my property going north is the point of the mountain. Going south is in Juab County, Mona. Let me give you the idea of the impact fee that you're dealing with, that you're about to, as you said, inclined to adopt. You're adopting a tax or an impact fee. Let me show you how. The difference between that location where I'm talking about and Mona is about $7 per ton to move concrete sand. And if you take a 42 ton truck, you're talking about $280 for one load of sand. If a home is built that's a 3,000 square foot home and needs 10 loads, you just made an impact fee of about $3,000 on that home. If you look at the amount of sand that's on the property I'm talking about, you're looking at about 30 million tons. 30 million tons multiplied by the numbers I just gave you, you're talking about an impact fee of hundreds of millions of dollars that you're about to assess on the future property owners of Utah County. I understand the concerns that you said about the impacts on roads. There are ways to mitigate those. And I think that's what this conversation really should be about. For example, I've spent 2 years studying the use and working with Sovereign Lands, Laura Alt and Sovereign Lands Division, about using the lake like they do for carp and barging and moving materials by that method. It's very, I'm not talking about building Fantasy Island out there. That's not me. Okay. All you need is a certain amount of water and a barge. They do it in the Midwest all the time. There's ways to solve the impacts, yet still use the resource wisely. Now, I need to show you that so I can move on with my
And
time.
again, I want to be equitable, so we want to
Yes.
try and work.
Yeah,
on this.
well, in short,
Maybe if you could,
it's.
I ask questions, maybe we could kind of
Yeah,
reset
and
some
that's-
of
It's
that.
a
That's why I'm
massive-
happy, is 'cause you've
This
asked
is a
questions.
massive waste of natural resources insofar as the property that I'm concerned, and let me just show you why, if you don't mind me approaching. you.
Absolutely.
Here's the 800 acres I'm talking about. The pink lines are the lines of the property that I have permitted. The black's the BLM adjacent to it. We can't go back in time and tell Mother Nature how to put the material and where. Okay. The material is laid in just like this. And if you want to look at Google Earth, I spent a few hours on this. I think I did a pretty good job. It was pretty close. I stole my wife's salt bill for her class, but this in the pink is what I'm already permitted to do. So if you want to go in a time machine in the next 15 years, this is going to happen right there. That will be removed. Okay. Then the BLM, according to the letter I just read, they can lease this black behind me. Okay. But the way that this is affecting my property and the way you've written this and the way the zoning rules are, we'll have to skip an odd little shape in between. We'll go back behind it. We'll pull that out. So in 20 years, my grandkids are going to fly over this and say, I told you Grandpa was crazy. Look how he mined that. Okay, and what you're going to have there is an eyesore for all future generations to see. That's why I believe that before you adopt this, you really need to look closely at how you're affecting each property owner. Because this is reality of how you would be affecting my property right here. Is I would have this odd shaped, A-shaped separation that is probably no wider than just a couple hundred feet. And eventually over time, if this material's all been tested and we know it's good with the BLM, this could get eaten out as well, and then you would have this little isolated thing out there. So
What is that? Who owns that little,
This is the BLM.
no, the other one that's left?
This one right here?
No, what's
Oh,
left?
that one, right
Here.
there.
This is me.
No, the little chunk that's left right here.
Oh, well, it would be about 50% owned by the BLM and 50% owned by me. And that's the waste of natural resources. You would have about 2.2.
Is it in the same section?
No, it's technically split, and so you have half of an A on each side at that point.
See what
And
you're
so you would be wasting 2.2 million tons of sand on both sides of that line. You're talking about a natural resource waste that's.
See, I don't understand that, because if you can mine the one on the backside with BLM, why would you not be able to take that half of the,
Because you need to look at the county ordinance about the setbacks and how the mining rules go in terms of how you have to keep a certain high wall grade, and then you have to test the material to see how it sloughs off. That's what it creates, is
But
it
if you
creates this island.
but if you were to mine, if you were to do the whole thing, you'd probably just go all the way through.
You can't safely do that. You have to mine on a certain angle of repose and leave that, and then you'd have to go around to the backside and leave that as well. And then there's a county ordinance regarding the setback down the property line that would strand that in the middle. And all I'm asking is, if you just look at these details, you'll see that out of the 10,000 acres, this may make sense for a good deal of it. It doesn't make sense for all of it. And this is one perfect example here where it does not make sense. It's gonna be an eyesore for all of the future generations to look at, and they're gonna say, in fact, I'd like to enter this in the county records, and you can put it out there in your little, showcase, and then 20 years from now, they can see, how did that happen? Well, that's how it happened, right there. And so if you just look at the details of how it affects each individual property, one, and two, study a little bit more about the economic impact that you're having on doing this, because you are pushing the use of the natural resources out to Juab County, and the next one going west is probably gonna be Twilla County, and eventually the point of the mountain is gonna go away. And then we're gonna be like California that pays $35 per ton for concrete. And we're going to regret it. So I can leave that for you, or? But I worked hard.
Yes. I appreciate the effort and time into that.
My name is Nita Birch. I'm with the South Utah County Community Voice. My great-grandmother was a Mohawk Indian On behalf of the Indian nations, please protect the Indian history on West Mountain. On December 11th, 2017, the Utah Historical Office authorized a survey to be conducted to locate and document the Indian petroglyphs on West Mountain. We met on Lincoln Beach. A few representatives of the Utah Rock Art Research Association, a BLM representative, Julie Sainsbury, and I were present for the survey. Our group of about 7 people spent nearly 2 hours documenting some of the amazing petroglyphs. From the DLGM informal hearing on November 9th, 2017, and the information gathered by the Lincoln Beach survey, a memorandum from April Abadi, the environmental scientist, was sent to John Baza, the division director of DLGM, dated January 3rd, 2018, acknowledged the fact that there are historical resources located on West Mountain. The previous owner of the Benjamin Pit and Kilgore both conducted 2 official cultural surveys, the first one in 2012. In 2014, when Kilgore took over the pit, another survey was done in the area, and again they claimed no cultural resources. The memorandum in the Lincoln Beach survey proved the previous surveys incorrect. At last Tuesday's hearing, we were told that a family on 7300 South in Benjamin has cracked walls from the gravel trucks passing their home. I grew up in Southern California. In 1971, the Sylmar earthquake hit, measuring 6.5 on the Richter scale at 6 a.m. while I was getting ready for seminary. My home rolled and cracked like a boat. It was terrifying. Do you know how long most earthquakes last? Only 15 seconds. A truck driving by a home is equivalent to a 3.5 earthquake. A full gravel truck can weigh up to 380 tons. The gravel trucks are destroying the homes and yards near the roads on the trucks' routes. On Expert GPS states that Utah has 702 mines. The 7 mines on West Mountain aren't even listed. Years ago, West Mountain was covered with trees, as the other mountains surround our Happy Valley. Between fires and mines, trees are gone, but there is still amazing vegetation, especially in the spring, one of which is the Christ Indian paintbrush flower. This flower only grows in unique areas, one of which is West Mountain. A letter from CMC Rock threatened to sue the county if you voted to rezone West Mountain, claiming their property rights will be violated if you rezone. What about our property rights? The hundreds of residents in Benjamin, Genola, Lakeshore, Palmyra, and West Mountain. CMC stated that the local public benefits daily from the product their mines produces. The agricultural products from the areas near West Mountain go to several states, not just Utah. Yes, we need gravel mines, but there are already 702 other mines available. We can survive without the gravel from West Mountain. We cannot survive without food. As for conditional use, the previous Benjamin Pit was allowed on West Mountain on a conditional use basis for the purpose of helping to repay Live 15 in 2012. When their 18-month limit expired, they dishonestly sold the site to Kilgore. So much for conditional use. There are multiple critical reasons why West Mountain should be rezoned, all of which you already know. The vegetation and trees could come back, but not if the mountain is gone due to the mines. So do the right thing and vote to rezone West Mountain to grazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Julie Sainsbury, and I'm a resident of West Mountain. I appreciate the work and effort that you as commissioners have done on this grazing zone. I realize it's a complicated issue, and I realize that there's a lot of interests that are involved. Those as landowners out there in regards to homes, agriculture, the other uses that you'll commonly see out there, and also those as the gravel companies and the BLM and the other institutions that are affected by creating this new zone. As I mentioned last week, well, I'm on the board of South Utah County Community Voice. We were organized over a year ago because we knew there was a need. We knew that in our area of the county, we needed our voice heard. And because we weren't a city, you are our voice, but we needed a way to communicate with you. So we've been here, and we've tried to do the process. And we see that things are being heard, and we do appreciate the work. I mentioned this at the end of the meeting last week. In the course of the conversation, the county attorney brought up that there was some alternate language that would allow mining as a conditional use in the grazing zone. Right now, it's not part of it, but the alternate language was there, which to me opened up the possibility that it could be considered. I am opposed to that in the sense if you were to do the grazing zone, just one grazing zone, and conditional use of mining is in there. The reason why is because, as I mentioned at the end of the meeting last week, in one of the CE1 zones, I had listened to a county commission meeting where the public was there, had very well thought out reasons of why a pit should expand. And in the end, the commission voted to expand it because it was in there under conditional use. I realize in regards to the BLM, what we have always known, the BLM can make their decision whether the county, it's, whatever the county is zoned or not. So using that as a reason not to change the grazing really doesn't impact anything. Because right now under mining and grazing, the BLM still can have mining in that area. Politically, it looks well if that they are congruent and lined up with what the county does. But whether or not the county looks, if the county chooses to change, the BLM still has their autonomy to lease the sand. So that's really not a consideration of why not to do it. One of the other reasons why I was opposed to putting mining in as a conditional use is that there are deficiencies in the system that we have run into as a community voice. Some of those deficiencies, one of the biggest, that I've been told by 3 of the different state agencies that they recognize there's a need. They recognize that things need to be done, but they simply don't have the funding and the manpower to monitor. Okay, so the DAQ comes out quarterly. The EPA recommends that there's air monitors, that there should be air monitors 24 hours a day. Okay, deficiencies. They couldn't, the culture survey was approved. Nothing was there. Deficiency, human error. There's other reasons, but I know I'm short on time. As I've thought and as I've pondered this, looking at all the different needs, I look at the G1 zone, the grazing zone, and on the east side of the mountain, of West Mountain in particular, with the cumulative effect of 7 operating mines already out there, a grazing zone with a mining as conditional use does not satisfy what is required. That is why a grazing zone is being established. Growth has happened. The county has changed. There is a need. If for some reason, as you look at it, you feel like maybe there, in some places, this mining still needs to happen, create 2 zones like you have done in the critical environment zone. You have the CE1 zone, which as a conditional use allows mining. You have the CE2 zone, which does not. They both have unique needs. On West Mountain, we have the unique need, especially on the east side, for a zone that does not allow mining in any way under conditional use. Perhaps you could create a G1 zone, a grazing zone that would allow mining with conditional use, but those conditional uses would have to be strictly outlined. Other things that are not considered, population density, road infrastructure, those have got to be in the conditional uses. And when a traffic study is done, when a traffic study is done, it's got to be on a job day. When those trucks are running, they've got to be outlined. And then create a G2 zone that does not allow mining in any way. Create the zone that the county needs. And I appreciate all of this. Like I said, I know it's complicated. I appreciate what you do. You have a tough job. I've gained as I've watched and seen everything you handle. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Shayla Hawkins. I live on 8000 South in Benjamin. The South County voice does not speak for all of us. I feel like this has been a huge waste of all of your time. The things that were discussed 4 years ago at the Benjamin Park were the roads, the infrastructure, the things that needed to happen. We're not going to stop mining. We need it. All these homes that are being built, where do they think that their resources are coming from? I think that the issues that needed to be addressed, that a lot of us residents thought were being addressed, such as the roads, so that it's safe. We live there. My mom and dad's front porch is 25 feet from that road. Not just the Kilgore trucks, but all of the other traffic that is coming from the area, from the homes, all of the other industry that's there. None of it's being addressed. It's getting extremely frustrating, I'm sure, for you guys, for a lot of us residents that feel like people are speaking on our behalf and it's not being addressed of what needs to be addressed. I think that it's opening up for lawsuits in the future for the county to start changing and deciding who can do what with their land. And I think that it has not really been addressed what needs to be. We need our roads fixed. 8000 South is a county road. My mom was hit by the overspray of a county snowplow last winter on her front porch, okay? This is an issue that if it's not addressed, somebody's gonna get hurt. I mean, this isn't, just that we want to stop from having a mine. We need these things addressed. They should have had sufficient haul roads or whatever put in place, because it's not just Kilgore. I mean, people go by my house, that is a 40-mile-an-hour road. And it's not just the trucks, it's the residents that live in West Mountain, Benjamin, Palmyra, Lake Shore, wherever, that travel that road to access the freeway. Nobody does 40 miles an hour on that road. I have a child, we farm. The road is not sufficient to handle all of this that's happening. The wreck that happened on 3200 and 8000 South with the truck tipping over was a warning. So I implore you, as our commissioners, to please address our county roads. That is what needs to be addressed here, not rezoning everything and telling people, because of a handful of people, what they can do with their land. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Robert Stevens from Provo, Utah. This whole thing reminds me of the quote from Ebenezer Scrooge when he said, "Gentlemen, if you want to have my corn, you'll have to pay the price." Ebenezer Scrooge had a monopoly, and the people who bought the corn knew that, and they had to pay the price. The cost of gravel has been heading up about 9% a year. I'm told again in February it will go up another. In your document from November, in the commission report, it says that the purpose of this is to prevent new earth extraction operations from beginning. Is it okay if I bring it up to you and you can see it if you didn't read it? It's not likely this has anything to do with a grazing, and that's used as a front, as the people here will applaud for it to happen. Instead, after that happens, then you'll just rezone entire sections into the grazing zone and exclude new operations from happening. That, gentlemen, is called a violation of antitrust laws, and that is illegal under the Constitution of the state of Utah. I was really impressed last week when you delayed the meeting. It makes a lot of sense to have the mines and the pits and the people and the excavators and the truckers and the law enforcement all gathered in a room and discuss the issues in a reasonable way. And if we have to make a bunch of concessions for each other, then we can do that. Thank you very much. One more. Once you do have monopolies, what happens? The price goes up for the people, for new houses, for the county. When you want to buy stuff, you have to pay more. And innovation goes down. Why innovate if you have a monopoly? CMC Rock, his report was really impressive. He's considering of dredging the lake. He's already been looking into that, and he'll put his cement on barges across the lake, and I suppose it will end up on some location along the highway. He wants to innovate. There are a lot of possibilities in the future that may happen, but if we declare monopolies illegally, there's no reason to innovate. There's no reason to go redesign your trucks so it doesn't make a lot of noise or reduce all the dust. So this whole thing is just shady. I bought land out there, on 7300 South, and at first it was out in the country. Now there's trucks going by all the time. I realize you want to have places where we can get sand, gravel, cement, and fill and base, and you know that the fluid that it has to haul, the more expensive it's going to be. Thank you very much, and I hope.
Can I ask you a question, Robert?
Yeah.
As you know, as we've had phone conversations on this issue, the one word preventing seems to be the sticking point in there.
Yeah, exactly.
I did talk with community development, some of our lawyers about that word preventing, which appears to come from the commission. It wasn't necessarily the commission's language. Nevertheless, as I heard that last week on a monopoly basis, which I didn't even know where you're coming from, frankly, on a monopoly basis. I see the tie there, and as you're aware from our conversation, whenever it was, a couple days ago or whatever, I don't quite see it the same way. I see an attempt to try to say what's going to be in there. Maybe it was on the preventing. That word choice was probably the inappropriate one, but I've also had emails, coming here and there, saying there was collusion or that the meeting was postponed last week because, people are in their pockets or handing out money or doing other kind of collusionary things. I don't even know where that comes from. The reason why I suggested, if anybody knows me, I like to work through the process and understand it as best as possible. That's the reason why I proposed that we continue it for a week. It wasn't because there wasn't a group here to speak the other way, and so if I could just kind of dispel any of those types of rumors that this is in some way, and I get it that if you look kind of to the past a little bit, you could probably point to some things that would be shady, if you wanted to put it that way. But on my part, and I really don't see it from the other commissioners either, I don't see anything in which we're trying to go against the antitrust laws or use monopolies or do it. I mean, it was even expressed to me that the people don't even know what they're doing. They're the ones that are actually the ones that are fighting for this as a puppet for this monopoly to be set up. I can't go down those paths. And so I know we kind of have little disagreements on some of that, but I think it was important to kind of, if I could change that word from preventing to something else, I probably would.
It's okay if I ask, and so if you would make the change, what word would it be?
I think it would probably be, instead of saying while preventing, I would probably say something in the sense of stating what can be done and can't be done within that
That's fair. Do you agree
zone.
too,
Yeah.
Commissioner Ivies and Graves?
Permitting.
Okay.
I don't support this, so I'm not even going to offer. I've never supported this. I've always been on the stance that I view this more like federal government set up. We have states and territories, and then as we localize, because we know what we want local. I am in support of West Mountain residents incorporating so that they can take control of their isolated land, because I agree there are spots that this makes sense for that area. And that's the problem is we're the county commissioners. We have to do what's right in the north end, the south end, the east end. It doesn't matter. And so I have never supported this type of action. for countywide. That doesn't mean for a specific area.
I agree. If I can mention, I don't mind the idea of a new zoning. However, if it's forced upon the people in whole sections, there are people who have mining rights. There are people who have animals, and grazing's wonderful. And I ask myself, what's the benefit? And the only one I could think of would be, so their taxes are lower, and they keep it in the green belt. I can't think of any other.
It couldn't be for food?
Yeah, for food
Just
too,
asking.
right? Yeah, for food or whatever. But in terms of financial situation, what's the benefit, right? What's the benefit to have alfalfa on your property? Well, because you can keep it in the green belt and your taxes are lower. But I think that if you establish the ordinance and then someone says, I'd like to have all my land under the new zoning for grazing, that's their choice. But to force it on everybody else and leave all the mines there in the pits, then that doesn't look right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Shauna Phelps. I live out at West Mountain, and I'm going to address his word use. Kind of bothered me last week when he used this. I'm going to read some definitions for those that are here, and maybe for this gentleman here, of monopoly. The exclusive possession or control of the supply or trade of a commodity or service. Another definition, which is close to that, is exclusive control of a commodity or service in a particular market, or a control that makes possible the manipulation of prices. So for according to his definition that we are creating a monopoly, somehow we are going to have this wonderful financial benefit. That is not what this is about. We are just as concerned about property rights as they are. And there's a conflict here because with property rights, you want to be able to do what you want to with your property, and they want to be able to do what they want with their property. But when there's a conflict that involves people's well-being, people's health, people's livelihood, it's not one business versus another business. It's multiple businesses out on West Mountain that are being affected detrimentally by one particular business. Even though there's 7 mines, it's one particular type of business. And so there has to be concessions here. And we don't want to be unfair to them. And we don't want to say you can't mine. And we don't want more expensive prices for building. My husband and I are right now in the middle of trying to expand our fruit farm. We also have bees. We have lost so many hives over the past few years since that mine has started. It's hard sometimes when you're in the midst of your business to sometimes realize how it affects everybody else. You know, when we had the mink farm that moved in out there, all of a sudden you could not go out into your front yard because it smelled so bad. It was overwhelming. So as property owners, we need to respect the rights, or we need to understand or think about what we're doing and how does this affect somebody else. So thank you for trying to get everybody's opinions and everybody's concerns and trying to mesh this whole thing together. I am for a zoning change, but I also don't want to tell a mine and make it really difficult for a miner to do something. But on the other hand, I don't want 1,000 acres to be mined on West Mountain. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Aaron Sabin. I live on West Mountain. Sean is actually one of my neighbors. So I'm in construction. I understand we need product. Otherwise, we're out of a job or prices skyrocket. I moved out to West Mountain because I wanted farmland. I wanted some room to do what I wanted to do, and not have my neighbors tell me what to do with my own land. So obviously we're in a little conflict here with this. When it comes down to it, it really comes down to how is what you're doing with your land affecting me with my land? Do I get to keep my rights to it with my land without any damage from what you're doing to me? Or basically, if I do something on my property and it's damaging my neighbors, obviously somebody's got to step in and say something. I can't do that to my neighbor. My thought is these trees, these orchards have been out there for how many years? And if they were there first, all right, shouldn't the mine take into consideration the damage they're doing to that property, to that business? You got to see it in the spring when we're out there. We see a dust cloud. We understand the winds come through. We get a lot of dust, a lot of dirt. We get layers of dirt on our house because of the mine right above us. It's Kenny Sings right above my property. Okay. Well, the way the wind pattern comes down. So obviously the other one's slightly out of wind pattern unless it shifts the other direction. But we get dust clouds through in the spring and the fall during when we've got either harvest going on or we've got pollination going on. If you see, I was searching for my photos, I couldn't find them. The dust cloud's huge. We're talking the trucks kick this up. They don't do the water protection on the roads. I've begged them, I've called Kenny Singh, I've talked to bosses, I've talked to you name it. I've talked to a lot of these plants. I've called in the sheriffs, I've called in the highway patrol because of the trucks running the stop signs. I've been run off the road by these trucks. There's countless damage happening by this, and just please take this all into consideration when you're going through this. As far as the greenbelt goes, people don't understand how much we actually produce on these small lots. We probably put more care into these 5-acre lots than most people do, or most of these farmers do for their big ones. They produce a lot, but we put a lot of care and a lot of time into them produce. So they are producing lots, and that please take that into consideration. We have our greenbelt for a reason, and we like producing on it. We produce a lot of stuff. I don't want to tell someone else what to do with their property. I just don't want them damaging mine or my neighbors. That's what it comes down to. So unfortunately, I do have to be for this, but I also have a hard time with it being not in my backyard. So I'm torn on it in that way.
But the mine in your backyard will still be operating whether we pass this or not.
I do understand that.
That's my frustration. I've heard what West Mountain residents have come to say. I've publicly stated I am for, I talked about it before we got into budget. I told the commissioners, I'm a vote for spending, and our engineering director told us it'd be over $3 million for a new road to fix that. I've listened to the safety concerns. I care about the kids. I said I was a vote for it. It was never brought up once. Instead, we do these things that don't actually change what's going on in your lives right now. Yes, it may stop another mine for a couple of years until the miners get together and pony up enough money to get a commission candidate to come in and change the zoning. That's how easy zoning can be changed. We're not talking about real fixes. That's the problem. We need real fixes.
So to my point, okay, sorry, I'm getting off. My point is, if we could at least get them to do some reclamation during the process, which I haven't seen. You go up into Kenny Sings, there's no reclamation done up there. It's a giant gravel pit. The dump doesn't do much. We've had to go in meeting after meeting with the Payson City to get them to keep their trash off our property. So it's a countless problem out there, and they're part of that whole pit back there. So it's getting them to do the reclamation at least while they're going, which will keep the dust down, keep the get plants going. So
I agree. We should be having those meetings and those discussions. I agree. We should.
That's my question. I mean, yeah, unfortunately, have to go towards the vote for that. I have to be towards it, but I'm asking really more than anything, even the existing ones, let's ask them to do some reclamation, and they have to do it anyhow. Why not do it as they go? Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
My name is Lana Creer Harris. I speak for myself and also the Lauren W. Creer Trust. The trust owns land in Benjamin. From what I hear, most of what is going to be needed is mitigation because it's too late to stop. So the mitigation that you're going to have to absolutely look at, and you're going to have to drive out someday in the midday and sit in I don't know, Millicent Larson's backyard and watch the mountain and watch what comes up off of it. At the minute they know you're out there, that water truck will be out there dropping dust. Those drivers will be in a lower gear. It's a matter of you guys seeing the reality and then figuring out we can't stop it, we can't throw them off the mountain, we're going to have to mitigate. They've got water. There's not enough water left out on West Mountain to drown a horned lizard. And so, and I grew up with water. I have irrigation companies all through my family. I have water masters. I've grown up with water discussions every day of dinner. And so I do understand it, and there's not enough out there. And somebody's going to have their well run dry. Now, there are people out there who do not understand the difference between water shares, I own so many shares, and actual wet. You don't get water, no matter how many shares you have, if the water's not there. And there are a lot of people that don't understand that, and that's an educational process. The air quality is terrible. And I don't wash my truck. If I wash my truck, it'd probably fall apart. The only thing holding it together is dirt. But the dirt on the top is a very pale, dusty dirt. It's not Leland dirt. It's not my unpaved lane dirt. It has come from clear across the valley and landed on my truck in a rain. So there's some stuff going on there. If it's landing on my truck, it's landing on the hay, it's landing on the grain, it's landing in the watering troughs. Heaven knows where it's landing in Utah Lake. So there is a dust plume that you're going to have to figure out how to mitigate. The roads will be beaten to pieces. Those are extremely heavy trucks. They drive hell-bent for leather, and they're going to have to be slowed down, and those roads are going to have to be built. And you're right, they didn't do the money. But the county has been known for not having enough money. And so you are going to have to figure out how to mitigate the road damage. Petroglyphs, there is no way to mitigate damage to petroglyphs. They're either fine or they're dead. And at some point, they're going to be ground up and turned into bituminous fill.
They're also being shot at, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
With both problems out there.
There's a lot of problems out there. I've grown up walking around out there. And I'm older than you are. Okay. So petroglyphs not only belong to history, there's a tribe out there that historically those are theirs. And you have to remember that. The land use, there's multiple land use out there. There's agriculture, and there's people who just want to live out there. And then you've got the mine, and you've got orchardists, and you've got a lot of really conflicting land use, and you're going to have to figure that one out, and what to mitigate and where to put who. The influence on agriculture is the one thing that nobody was really paying attention to when they bought the land and started digging holes. Most of Utah County is a big gravel moraine. You just have to look up at the mouth of Spanish Fork Canyon and you see the gravel moraine come down. So the impacts that you've got concerned with, I think, begin with reining the mining in, no matter what the miners say. I think that's where you're going to have to go, because we farmers have been there longer. My great-great-grandfather was a miner, but he was over at Mammoth. So the front range mining here is new, and I think you're going to have to deal with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Charlotte Hawkins. I live on 8000 South. This is one of probably the very few county roads that are used by the mining operation. It's not just mining. It's all of the heavy delivery trucks that we see that go to the egg farms, that go everywhere. Pretty much everything that comes into our area there, we see on our road. The people that live in the community, the big trucks. We got people that are constantly on that road from cement plants that have an easier, better access on a state road system, but they don't use that road system. They come down 8000. Since this all first started and we met with everybody at the park 4 years ago, our main issue has been the safety of the roads. And I know we may not be able to, the zoning change isn't going to stop what we're seeing right now. It's not going to help the trucks going by people's houses. You don't dare allow your kids out front. I am close, so close to that main road. And this road is traveled at freeway speeds. Since Kilgore started operating, we had county sheriffs on that road every day. I mean, the law enforcement was always there, kind of help keep things in check a little bit. Since this pit has really been in operation, we don't see any of that anymore. It's like everybody's backed off and just, that's like everybody's personal Audubon. It is not an Audubon. It's 40 miles an hour for a reason. It is not a safe road. And I wish if we could get everybody to focus on the one thing we can change. Let's change the safety of the roads and where they travel. Make these big companies, or the state as a whole, put in a haul road. There's no need for this all to go right through the heart of our community. There's no need. There's enough open area. We can fix the road system. And I ask that you please help us do something with the road, the county road on 8000 South.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jeannie Lewis. I would like to just say a few things, and then I have a letter from Cynthia Chamberlain that she couldn't be here today. I'm definitely for the rezoning. I'm a 30-year resident, farmer. Been to most of all these meetings, and I appreciate your considerations in our behalf, because that's about the only place we can go to. Most of all of it's been said. The questionable way the mine came into being, all that kind of things. But just like to say, please consider it. And I'll go with Cynthia's letter. She says, my name is Cynthia Chamberlain. I am here representing the Chamberlain Family Trust Farm. I am here in support of the creation of a new zone, the grazing zone. Most of us in support of the grazing zone are humble workers of the ground, farmers, orchardists, and ranchers. We don't have fancy lawyers and lobbyists to speak for us like the mining companies do. We are working through a system of government we have to enact change through our only advocates, you, the county commissioners. When I left the meeting last week where the item was given continuance, I admit I was disheartened. I felt all that had been accomplished was to give the mining companies a week's notice to get their people here, and today. Anyway, today's meeting has a much different feel than last week. I'm in favor of this new zone, mining and grazing should seldom be a zone together. When grazing is done properly, it protects, beautifies, and betters the land, maintaining its usefulness for future generations. Mining eats the land. Once the land is mined, you can never go back, simply because they cannot coexist on the same plot. It's the reason that these two should not coexist in the same zoning. When we moved our home to West Mountain, or moved to our home in West Mountain, we knew that the area behind us was zone mining and grazing. We looked around at all the homes and orchards and felt sure that no one in their right mind would allow a mine so close to homes. Surely it would remain grazing land for all ranchers in the area. We were wrong. Mines, and especially asphalt plants, should not be allowed in areas that are predominantly residential. Asphalt plants are industrial and should be in industrial zones. As you and the Planning Commission plan for the future, our future, I would ask that you take into account how our lands should be used, what uses need protection, what uses leave the land so raw, and that they are good for nothing. Thank you. I also just wanted to say I have a big concern over wells, because we've had to redo our well, and you know, once it's gone, and we don't have any recourse. We just don't have any water unless we do something different. So there's just a lot of water to go towards something like that. So anyway, thank you.
Hi, my name's Debbie Fair, and I'm a fairly new member of the West Mountain area. But the concerns that I have at this meeting are phenomenal compared to what I thought was really going on here. We don't really have any say in this. You guys are going to make the decision, and the BLM can do whatever they please, is my understanding from what I'm hearing today. You really don't have any control because we're not incorporated. Is that correct? So I don't even know what we're doing here to start with. My questions are, I'm concerned about the road, infrastructure on the roads. I'm concerned about the water, which is, I don't even know how they can think they can use the water there are millions of gallons of water going to be used in these just to get their sand out, not to control the air quality, let alone the air quality. So I don't know how they plan to do that. Nobody's addressed how they're going to control the air quality. Nobody's addressed how they're going to fix the roads. Nobody's addressed where they're going to get all this water from. The mining are here like, oh, well, this is a, what did they call it? A natural resource, and we need to have our natural resource. Well, so are bees natural resources, and so are trees natural resources. So I'm kind of having a hard time buying into that one. But I understand that the mining people, should be able to have their right to have their land, do what they want. I think, though, that this began as a farming company, and I see what's happened at the Point of the Mountain, and I don't think anyone can deny that it's a total eyesore. And so I don't see how mining can say that if we don't mine it, it will be an eyesore, because that's what mines do, is create eyesores. So I want to know, you talk about mitigations, but I want to know who's going to pay for all of this, because I'd like to see it postponed another year. And I'd like to see this zoning thing passed just because it will slow people down. Not because we're going to win or anything. Let's just slow people down and think about who's going to pay for all of this stuff. Why can't we have some sort of impact fees against the mining companies or something, instead of just saying, well, it's us against them? Let's work together to figure out how, they've got a lot of money. They're going to get a lot of money out of their mines. Let's have some impact fees on them. Of course, they'll pass that on to the consumer also, but, let's slow them down a little bit. And that's my opinion. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. Any additional public comment? So we have some.
Excuse me. My name is Susan Chapman. I grew up in Benjamin at the foot of the mountain, and I'm new to the conversation, so I apologize if this has been covered before. but I did a health needs assessment for Spanish Fork City a couple of years ago, and I ran across a startling statistic that I want to share. And this is a concern for me because I grew up in a home where I had a father with severe asthma, and it really affected my family. And as I did this health needs assessment for Spanish Fork, this was a separate health needs assessment. We got a grant for Spanish Fork City that was over $250,000 to help the city with some other things, but it included the rural community of Benjamin, Palmyra, West Mountain. Anyway, what I found was that the community of West Mountain's Benjamin, Palmyra area had a very high asthma rate. And this is diagnosed by a doctor. This is according to the Utah Department of Health. Their rate is 13.9%. The national average is 8%. Spanish Fork, by comparison, is 9%. And I'm not saying that this is from 2012 or 2014 to 2016. I'm not saying this is caused by the mines by any means. That is not what I'm saying at all. But I'm saying that this is a high-risk population. And if you'll notice that on any given day when we have when we have pollutants in the air, there are an asthma population is at risk. And so if you can see it in the air, you know that a population with asthma is in trouble. And so I remember as a child when my father would struggle. And so I just want you to keep this in mind when we consider these talks, that the population out here will struggle and with breathing. If you look in this room and you look at if you can count out, how many people, what would this percentage look like who would struggle with breathing if there's pollutants in the air? Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Tamara Atkin. I'm a West Mountain resident. And I come from a town in California called Bakersfield. It is always in the top 3 in worst air quality. Sometimes it's number 1. It's always up there with Detroit and LA, and it does not have the industry that Detroit or LA has. It's an agricultural area.
Some of the best oranges this time
Your
of
oranges
year.
will come from there. Your carrots will come from there. If you read what town, it will have to say Bakersfield. So why is their air so terrible? They don't have, those things that Detroit and LA have. It's because they're down the hill from LA, and it's a valley. And so the air comes down in a pocket, and it just stays. And most people do have asthma that live in Bakersfield. I have asthma. I moved here to Utah, and I live out in the country on a plot of land that belongs to my husband. It belonged to his parents before that. It belonged to his grandparents before that. These people who are asking for this change, because it's a new change, it sounds like they want something new. They really don't want something new. What they want is something old. They want the original state that they purchased land in good faith with a certain purpose. That purpose, while they were farming their lands, was changed. And as some people said today, they didn't know it was even changed. They didn't recognize it was changed until the harm came. And then they're like, hey, can we change it back? And you're like, no, we can do what we want with our land. I've heard people today and last week say, that this idea that you can tell people what to do with their land is not American, or it's against free agency or whatever. The fact is, that's what zoning is. Zoning is to say this happens here and that happens there. And they'll say we should be able to do whatever we want with our land as long as we're not hurting our neighbors. Once again, that's what zoning is. The reason this stuff happens here and that stuff happens there is so that you have areas that are meant for things. And our area is meant for grazing, farming, agriculture, whatever you call the trees. Words not coming to me. Orchards, thank you. That's what our area is for. That's what it's been for long before any mine was there, that's what it's been for. So to zone it that way, that really makes sense. Now, we evidently have a bunch of sand there or something, you know, that's not what the people moved there for, that sand. I mean, so it's there. And it's in other places. It could be in other places as well that we don't even know about at this point. But the point is, if what we're trying to say is that people who own land or people who buy land have rights that should be respected, those rights should be respected by the people whose grandparents moved there to farm. And I lost my point, but there we go. I hope I made a good point. So, Tamara Atkin, West Mountain resident.
Thank you.
Frank Koenig, Spanish Fork, Utah. I just wanted to have a couple of questions. Last week, I forwarded an email that I had gotten from Department of Oil, Gas, and Mining that outlined some suggestions, their suggestions, as to what should be done in the Kilgore operation. But this could apply to all of them, I would think. And I was wondering, regardless of what happens, whether Kilgore expands or anyone else expands, is there some way to ensure that some of those suggestions would be looked at, or because I thought a lot of that was good even for the existing mines, having trees around there or something. Poplars don't take that long to grow around there. I guess there's a water consideration and so forth, but would there be a way to for the public to know that some of these suggestions were being implemented, regardless if it's just for the mines as they exist now or expansion? The other thing I wanted to say was just we've talked about all this growth that's going to happen at the south end of the county, and we've talked about if we don't have gravel pits close by, that's going to cost more for materials for building and so forth. But somewhere in all this growth, I'm sure that the county and the state even will want to have some open property there. And here you've got a big open mountain. If you have an open space that's flat, nobody can tell it's open a half mile away. It just seems like an obvious open area to utilize, having that mountain, just to have the thinking move in that direction for the quality of the surrounding area. And if some ground's going to be designated park ground or open ground, why not think in terms of employing the mountain for that use? It's more visible, and if materials do go up in cost, that can be counterbalanced theoretically by the value of having the open space, making the appeal of the countryside more appealing than if it just looks like the point of the mountain. So I would suggest that would offset the rising cost of materials in some way. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment? All right, seeing none, I would express my appreciation to all those who have taken time to not only attend our meeting last week and this week, but I also have received a lot of emails and greatly appreciate the public's input on this particular issue. With that, we'll kind of close the public comment section and bring it back up to the bench here for additional thoughts or questions.
Guess I'll speak up. As I went through this process, this has been going on for quite some time. A lot of you know they held that meeting down there at the park and talked about these issues and have continued to talk about these issues, this issue, over and over. And there's a couple things as I just kind of explained the process that I have gone through in looking at this. One, there is conflict, and trying to find that balance is hard. I mean, it's not easy. It's a hard thing to look at this and try to balance it. So as I look at it, you put weights on one side and you put weights on the other side, and there's good points all along the way. But where does it start to tip the balance? Where do you tip? And that was where I was trying to get to. That's the reason why I wanted to look at every avenue, every aspect. I talked with Julie after the meeting. We talked about the roads. A road coming all the way out of there, with so that they can get their product out. So we're not going down through. How does that happen? How does that happen if the county puts forth the money to do that? Where does that come from? It comes from the residents here in the county for roads. In a city situation, a lot of times you'll find that if a developer comes in, this is where I go back to the impact fees. A developer will come in and say, I propose to do a development here in this area. And of course, the planning commissions and the cities and the city councils look at that and say, here's some of the impact that it's gonna give to the residents in this area. Maybe the sewer lines are too small and they have to be upgraded, or the water lines, or they always require roads and a certain amount of infrastructure and curb and gutter. We don't have that in the county where we see those impacts, and so again, as I kind of weigh those balances back and forth, how do we do this? How do we get that product out? And we all agree that sand and gravel, rock is needed and necessary for us in our climate, and it's an important commodity that we need to have, and you just can't find it anywhere. There's certain areas that it's at. So how do we balance that? How do we balance it appropriately? I was thinking of a friend of mine who used to have a dairy farm, generational dairy farm. It was right over there where Word Perfect, the old Word Perfect buildings. That was outside of town. Back then, it was outside of town. Had a dairy farm there, and it was always being used as a dairy farm. When I was talking with him later on, he had sold that to Word Perfect. It was rezoned commercial. You know what that did to the value of his land? It made him a millionaire overnight. He bought a house down in St. George. Him and his wife loved square dancing. They went around all over the place, square dancing. All of a sudden, he wasn't a dairy farmer anymore, generational dairy farmer. So zoning or rezoning has effects. It really does. It has effects positively and negatively in certain areas, but yet it was still done, and it will continue to happen. And to look at its effects, either positively, negatively. How you balance that aspect is a tricky balancing act. But and I've heard over and over, there's going to be a lot of lawsuits over this. Potentially, I don't know. I mean, you can sue for anything nowadays. But nevertheless, we still go through zoning processes all the time. So I look at this this change. If you're saying this is a county ordinance, this will be for the entire county. We don't have a G1 zone. It could be applied anywhere. Right now, we're just looking at that as a potential, having that as a G1 zone. I also talked with Julie about the G2, a G1 zone, a G2 zone, whatever it can take, and understanding that zoning does change. It does change from here to there, from mining and grazing to residential. Who knows? Maybe in the future it would go to R1 zones and you'll be incorporated into a city. I don't know what the future looks like for it. The BLM came to me and said, maybe you'd like to take this property over with after Kilgore is done with it. They're going to build this nice flat plat right there, and there could be hundreds of homes built there. That's what they told me. And so I don't know what the zoning looks like into the future, but I do know that we change it. So I look at this at this ordinance and the next ordinance as a little bit of a timeout. We're calling timeout right now as we try to figure out some of these issues. A timeout in the sense of that we're going to go forward, not that it can't be changed or it can't be modified or it can't be scalpeled out a little bit. I'd like to go through the one issue over here that I just heard today, and there's a few things in there that doesn't quite make sense to me, but I think we can work through some of those, and it's a process for us. It allows us to call a timeout, to look to see, okay, how are we getting product out of the mountain area, how we're getting it back so we can use it appropriately, and so I'm looking to be in favor of this ordinance change.
Thank you. Grace? I'll make just a couple comments. This is a weighty issue. Anytime we deal with land use issues and stuff, it's always weighty and something to be considered very heavily. Natural resources are our most precious commodity when it comes to what we have to continue progression and also to sustain life. And I believe it's absolutely critical that we look at those natural resources and we do our best, and that I do my best as your elected official to try and find ways to properly utilize and properly protect those. As I was working on Saturday in the tractor and various things all day, I got done, and as I often do in the evenings when I have time, I walked around my place. And I live in Benjamin, and I was on the back berm looking out over the farmland. And one comment that had been shared last week just kept striking at me. It said, "It's never the same. Once it's gone, it's gone." The reason I think that struck me so hard was because I said that a lot during my campaign. I said that a lot because I ran to represent a very small group of Americans, and that's the less than 2% of Americans that feed this nation. Absolutely, we need gravel for growth and development. I can find $7 extra a ton. But in the course of this meeting in America, we've lost 80 acres of farmland. Can't pay for that. If I can take an action today as a representative that will create a zone that people can utilize to try and protect natural resources that are essential for producing orchards, for producing protein in cattle, for producing wool and sheep, I'm happy to take that and to do that because I think it's critical that we continue to try and balance things out. And as Mrs. Atkins said, I want something that's a little old because no matter what happens moving into the future, we need that old practice of agriculture. This is not a front. This is an attempt. This is why I proposed this, because I felt it was critical as the leading agricultural receipt-producing county in the state of Utah, over $1 billion industry, that we take reasonable measures to try and protect that industry. And that's why I proposed this ordinance, and that's why I'll support it today. Certainly not for greenbelt taxes. I farm because I like it.
I'm going to keep it short because I said everything months ago when we did this. The problem is with an ordinance like this, we are ruining. When I ran, my whole goal to be a commissioner was, when my kids look back in 20 years, to make sure I made this county a better place. I was deeply involved in the real estate industry when the bubble burst. And bubbles burst for many reasons. Prices get so high and wages don't climb with them. And right now, that's what we're in the middle of. And taking actions like this. Now, Robert Stevens may be misspoken by others' point of view when he calls it a monopoly. But limiting the use of resources does, in fact, increase prices. Just like, elimination of orchards increased apple prices. Or, the year we had fires in California, my neighbors sell pine nuts to supplement their income. They didn't get to sell them that year because where they came from. All those things have impacts. This commission is about to embark on historic action, as I stated earlier. We will, in fact, be raising prices, and us three, are the ones that are impacting the future, and it's not going to take long for the ramifications of this to come forth. So,
I welcome those ramifications because I think it's preserving something critical.
Again, like I stated earlier, it makes sense in certain areas. There's no doubt about it. But to make, again, my great-grandfather actually, was a pig farmer. My other one was a builder. And it's just, it's sad because we feel like we're pitted against something. But the reality is we are Utah County Commissioners. We represent over 600,000 people. So I'm actually almost offended as a lifelong resident of Utah County and somebody who has farming roots. And actually, most of my family, members of my family own a lot of property out in Benjamin and helped settle that town many years ago. So I'm very familiar with the area. But to say I'm doing something and I promote an ordinance for 2% to represent 2% of, I just, fundamentally, I have a problem with that statement. Not because you're not trying to do something right to preserve farmland and stuff like that. That is a noble cause, and I'm with you on that. But at the same time, this doesn't change anything of the current practices, and I think we need to fix the current practices now. And all of these industries have come and said, hey, let's get together in a room. Let's get together. We're supposedly the Commission of Transparency and meetings and this and that, and we've never held or organized one of those meetings, and it doesn't take that long to do it because I know we've organized them for all sorts of things, and we've never gotten all this group together. So anyway.
Right. I had a meeting with BLM just for interest. Talked with Matt about this issue, and I said I realize that you can give permits without going through Utah County for this for sand and gravel. And I get it. And I explained to him kind of the impact that was going on there. And he mentioned to me, he says, when we look at that for this area, since it's becoming such a concern, let's get together and talk about what that impact is going to be. Because as they do a permit and they grant a permit, at the very beginning they have some latitude. And they can work through the latitude and saying this is how is this going to permit, or how's this going to affect the roads, how's this going to affect areas, and they can build it into their permit process. And he said that he'd be more than willing to sit down and do that with us. And I think this is the start of how we work through zoning issues, how we work through mitigation, how we negotiate back and forth, because it's not a tool that we have necessarily. I mean, I don't know. Do we really want to go down the road of doing impact fees in the county? I mean, that's always an option that's sitting out there. It's not one that we have exercised or put forward, but we do need. I mean, zoning to me. Look in the county right now. We zone right now 5.25 acres. I mean, how many of? There's probably millionaires sitting out here as this land starts becoming more valuable. Maybe they incorporate into a city, and all of a sudden now they say, let's take the 5.25 acres and we're going to take it down to 1/4 acre lots. Just like my friend up there at Word Perfect. The zoning can change. It can change over time. It will change and modulate back and forth. But for me, as I've looked at this thing again, I see it as a timeout fashion for us as we work down through and maybe look on individual bases and try to find ways that it can work. And that's the process that we go through. I remember a time, I don't remember the time, it was before my time, maybe some of you remember the time, when the ranchers and the farmers argued like crazy over rangeland. The farmers wanted to put up fences. The ranchers wanted to tear them all down. I mean, that was a battle it's part of the West, in which that was up there. I mean, our land and the governance of our land's going to mold and modulate back and forth as we look at these issues. And so again, I see this as a timeout fashion for us to start looking at.
Here's the problem. You and I, before Commissioner Ivey came in, and he was kind of involved from the outside because he was part of the Farm Bureau's group that met with us when we talked about the agricultural toolbox, and we started addressing this, and All Red Farms and a bunch of orchard farmers and farmers came and met with the commission. There is not one difference between passing an ordinance like this, and the reason I stepped out of that group was because the actions they were talking about. You're right, zoning can be a tool and a timeout, and Commissioner Ivey's words should ring scary to many, many people, and here's why. Zoning is important, okay? When he says we're trying to protect 2%, one of the ideas that were floated in this, and he's not suggesting this, but this is the slippery slope that I fight. The problem is if you can pass a zone where you're saying no more mining, what is to stop the county from passing a zone and saying no more building, and we are forcing you to farm on that land? It is not one bit of difference, but you will all be in here kicking and screaming when your kids will when they want to sell your farmland to somebody else. And that's the problem. This is not one bit of difference. This is just changing the zone for the moment.
Where you do it right now? 5.25 acres. You can't put 2 homes on there.
I've never supported that. I've always supported a lot less because, truthfully, water being a resource, the bigger home, the home you have on bigger acreage takes more water than doing 1/4 acre lots. when, you know, it's for me, when I saw the report from the water people that 67% of the water in Utah County is put into our grass and our yards, that is ridiculous. And that's why we will run out of water by 2050 if we don't learn to conserve the right way, let alone being able to run it for Harwood Farms for their corns or to feed your cows or to, you know, any of those things. So I'm just saying, to me, it's a slippery slope. That's why I opposed it then. I see this as a step in the same direction, and I would make the same fight for any of the farmers that came in and the county tried to impose it. And that was an ordinance proposal. That is what Envision Utah suggested to us.
I know.
One of the proposals.
I know.
And I'm like, that is ridiculous to me. So
No, I sat with a farmer down in Green, where is it? You can think of it. Help me. Green.
Mountain Green.
Oh, anyway, it's on the east side of the state.
Green River?
Green River. There we go. Green River. An old farmer. Looked just like my grandpa. You know, the wrinkles, been out in the sun forever. My grandpa was a dairy farmer, and he sat by me, and I was at the time I was working for the senator, and we were talking about land use, what's going on, what the federal government was doing to the farmer, and afterwards he pulled up and he talked to me and he goes, you know what, I have seen where we protect a prairie dog, a sage grouse, all these endangered species, a hook cactus. I don't even know how many of you know what a hook cactus is, but a hook cactus, this little plant that only comes up once a year, you know, in some of these places, and we're protecting all these species, and we have to do all this work to see how it's going to impact all these different groups and these special interest groups. And he said to the senator, he said, why don't we put something into law that says, let's protect the American farmer? Let's find something that will protect the American farmer. Let's put it into law. Let's see what the impact is when it comes to the American farmer. And so I listened to that, and I agree with him. If we even thought we had a chance to put that out there, say every single time that we talk about water or land use, we see how it's going to affect the American farmer. I think that would be a wonderful thing, to run down through that process and see how it works, because ultimately we're representatives of, yeah, we have a boundary that goes around that says Utah County on it and its land, but ultimately we're representatives for the people and what they're going through. There's a balance in there. There are times, and I do not believe in superior or senior property rights like we do in water. You know, you got a senior water right. I don't think because somebody moved there first that they can actually dictate what their neighbor does because they were there before the other one. I don't believe in that. I believe that property rights have equal standing. But we need to have this conversation, and I support us going through the process. This is not the end. I see this as the beginning of a conversation, and conversations that we can have into the future, because this is not the only area in the county that this is affecting. Believe me, this is coming like crazy. We see it all over the place. This is not the only way. So anyway, I'm going to get off the soapbox with it, and let's vote on this thing.
All right. Well, that kind of ends that. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion. I want to point one thing out there, though. There's one part of this ordinance that kind of bugs me. The taking out of the fish hatcheries. I can't remember the exact wording in there. The fisheries and stuff like that. That really just bugs me. I would like to make a motion that that be included. And so I'll make a motion that we adopt the ordinance as stated in number 4. For the Utah County General Plan, with the change or the inclusion of the fish hatcheries or fisheries. I can't remember the wording exactly on it, but it was like a one line.
Mm-hmm.
And that's my motion.
I will second.
All right. I have a motion and a second to adopt regular agenda item number 4 with a slight variation to include the allowance of fish hatcheries. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 2-1 with Commissioner Lee and Commissioner Ivey in the affirmative, Commissioner Graves in the negative. We'll now move to regular agenda item number 5. This is to look at adopt or denying an ordinance to amend the official Utah County zone map as stated with the outlined properties and locations. Any discussion or questions on this particular issue?
I'd like to see us put this off for a little bit from this standpoint, to go through these sections a little more closely and identify potentially based on the evidence that was given to us and a couple other things, just to make sure, we're not getting the entire area. I think we ought to spend some time making sure, reviewing each of these section pieces more carefully with planning, or with Bryce and maybe with Gary and the attorneys. So.
Oh, yes, just as a note, as you depart, if you could please make sure you've signed the roll, the attendance roll on the back little podium by the door.
And if you want to keep it this way, I'd incorporate, I'm just warning you. You don't have to like me, but I'm not wrong.
I'm prepared to act today, but if, Commissioner Lee, if you would like to look at this more time.
I've always, if a commissioner wanted to look at it more, I've always been.
I'm just saying, if there really are a zone or two that,
Well, sure, I think that, I'm fine. I think that if we're in agreement on that, I'd be fine with going, but I don't want to go forever. I want to go for like, what are we thinking?
a week or two, whatever. I mean,
I hate to drag these poor people over here all the time.
my guess is not a very long conversation with Bryce and those guys, because they've probably been through this a million times with planning commission and have
Right, and I was
familiar area.
Bryce, I was going to ask on that. Given the time frame that we worked through with Planning Commission and looking at the zones, would you have a recommendation, or if we adopt this today, is there a way for someone who might have been included to become exempted?
Bryce Armstrong, Community Development Staff. There's always the way to apply for a zoning designation after their zoning designation has changed. There could be some merit to that. We have had several letters of protest to be included, which is afforded by state law for a rezone, which have been referenced. State trust lands provided that, CMC Rock, and the BLM letter. In addition, we do have a ag protection area covered, South Shore Farms, that in order for them to have their zoning changed, they need to give their written consent.
Have they?
They've actually indicated they would like to remain the same zoning, and so.
Is that was in section, was it 8 and 9? I can't remember, or 9 and.
See, so we better sit on this so we can make sure, because I'd like to know all of those ones that are in protest, because that makes it a lot easier to at least move on in those ones where those landowners have identified.
No, that agricultural protection area was down in the southern tip area, if that's correct.
It was on the north end.
North end.
Is it on the north end?
Yeah, South Shore Farms. Probably 4 parcels. So I guess to that end, any zone change would need to change the legal description we prepared. There was some discussion at the Planning Commission of looking at more specific parcels to be included or excluded. One planning commissioner in particular wanted to do that, but the rest kind of felt.
I know, they were chicken. They didn't want to do it. They just passed it on to us.
Okay.
Well, with all fairness to them, we have tried to strip their power and tell them that they can't do anything which should come from us, the duly elected representatives. So I don't blame them for kicking it back to us.
And there was the commission asked for some significant data, which was provided to the Planning Commission, and I feel that they appreciated that, and we reviewed that in the meeting. So I think that was part of that.
And actually, the Planning Commission recommendation, which is the reason for my wanting to sit on this for a little bit, is they didn't want to create harm or affect anybody in their current operation in that zoning. That is actually what the wording that they used. So it would be in our best interest to just take a week pause on this to make sure we identify exactly the zones in there that are under protest or that would fall under the Planning Commission's recommendations and look at that.
I guess the one thing I would ask, if that's what the commission would like, then maybe have some specific criteria or a mechanism to analyze which would be included in.
Just those parcels under protest and or under agricultural protection.
Okay.
That would require a zoning change.
I think that's a start, but I mean, yeah.
Well, I mean, but those ones we know right now. Let everybody else come and we'll address them
I think specifically in the letters we received, the state trust lands and the CMC Rock specifically stated they did not want to be included. The BLM letter was a little more vague as far as the specifics of the individual parcels. So we can conclude kind of both scenarios.
Thank you. I would move that we continue regular agenda item 5 for 1 week.
And I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to continue regular agenda item number 5 for 1 week. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 I'll carry 3-0. Now move on to regular agenda item number 6. And I'll get this pulled back up here again. This particular agenda item is to approve an agreement with Operation Underground Railroad and accept a grant for law enforcement purposes. I actually don't have a lot of questions on this. I just found it as a unique, good opportunity and wanted to maybe have you explain how it came about and how this will be of benefit to the community moving forward in this particular area.
Not a problem. My name is Jason Randall. I supervise the Special Victims Unit for the Sheriff's Office as well as the Special Victims Task Force for Utah County. This came about, it was actually a little bit of a surprise for us. We tried to be very aggressive with online internet child sex trafficking. This last year, we've actually been very successful, both on the Sheriff's Office level with the Special Victims Unit as well as the Special Victims Task Force. What we call a traveler. A traveler is a person that preys on children over the internet, girls under the age of 13 or boys. And we are very, very aggressive in that type of investigation. Last year alone, we had more than 70 traveler arrests of these individuals that have been preying on our Utah County children. That number is pretty much tops in the nation for this type of unit. And because of that, because of the success we've had, what Operation Underground Railroad does is, in addition to conducting international operations to save children, on a local scale, they focus on getting funding, getting corporate sponsorships on the private side, and then funneling that money into the hands of law enforcement agencies that are doing this type of investigation. So what occurred in this case, it was kind of a surprise. Our operation, we work very hand in hand with the Attorney General's Office, ICAC, the Internet Crimes Against Children's Task Force, as well as with Homeland Security Investigations, HSI. And the Adobe Corporation made a donation to Operation Underground Railroad, specifying that needed to go to a law enforcement agency that is doing these type of investigations, and that's been producing. And so through that, we were contacted along with HSI, and this money has been offered to us. And it's in the agreement what that money is to be used for, because unfortunately this type of investigation is expensive. The training alone, for me to get one of my investigators up to speed where they can really be doing everything they need to be doing, is usually about 3 years of training, of practice, of different certifications they're required to have. And so this money's going to go for those
and
training
about $10,000 a year in cost for some of those.
In exactly, just maintaining our certifications, getting the new ones, and with the internet. In fact, I just looking on my phone this morning, a new training came out because we conducted an operation in Spanish Fork, where we made our first arrest of somebody who had been downloading child pornography from the dark web. And typically, if somebody's on the dark web, they're in an area we have no access to track them. Their router is anonymous, and we're finally getting the tools in place. And so again, this is a whole other area. So that's where this money is going to be used for, is the training, the equipment, and then the overtime to conduct these type of operations.
Very cool.
Awesome.
Thank you. And that, again, I just kind of wanted you to be able to explain that, because I think this is a wonderful opportunity and will be of significant value to our community for improving specifically the safety of our children.
Any questions?
No, I'll move that we approve the agreement stated number 6.
And I'll gladly second that.
I have a motion and a second to approve regular agenda item number 6. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 3-0. I do not have a need for regular agenda items 15 and 16.
We've still got 13.
Oh, yes, that's right. Sorry, I missed my hold there. We'll move to regular agenda item number 13. Now, and I believe Commissioner Lee, you had the question on that? Oh, no, this is our hold. This is in regards to approval of a butterfly biosphere agreement between Utah County and Thanksgiving Point Institute. This particular item was approved, I believe it wasn't last year, but the year 2016.
Yeah.
And there was a technical change on the location that's brought us back to us today. Any discussion on this item? It was continued from last week.
There's a comment.
Yes, and we would also, if there's no discussion here, we'll open it up for public comment.
Hi, my name is Robert Stevens. I'm from Provo, Utah. I have a question on this. I read through the document, and it seems like it will be the responsibility of the county to buy the land for a couple of million for this in order to be built. Is that the case, or did I read that wrong?
It's really in collateral because of the way the legislature has written the law in use of this fund. So it's a weird agreement.
So what does that mean in collateral? I don't understand.
Well, in a few years after they give us so much thing back, then they get the title of the land. So when Cabela's was brought here, the county, unbeknownst to some of us up here, owned a museum inside of it.
Yeah.
And it's depending on the type of entity you are to be able to use some of these funds depends on how or what it is used for. Some can be given it outright. Some have to be given, like a city or a municipality. They have to just state what the reason for, make sure follows those guidelines. But in their case, where they are a 501c3, it has to be done in a different manner.
So will we be reimbursed as citizens
Well,
for the $2 million
so-
that we give them?
That's always the debate, right? So the question is the short answer is no, as far as a direct reimbursement. But the question is does the county get reimbursed for the convention center? Okay, the same answer would apply here. In other words, because of the great work being done at Thanksgiving Point or at the convention center, the reality is the use of these funds that are collected on our recreation, our restaurant tax, the tourists, if you will, is why it's called the tourism tax. By expanding those things for the county to come, more and more people come, and therefore the direct benefit back to the county. In Thanksgiving Point's case, their direct benefit is not only do they produce quite a bit of sales tax revenue to the county, in essence, but with the success of the Curiosity Museum and hopefully the Butterfly Biosphere, they have been a great partner for our education, and so they have allowed free field trips at their expense, in essence, or because we give this to all of these elementary schools or secondary schools, whatever have it, so that they can come and the Utah County youth are served by this for free educational opportunities.
Okay, thank you very much for
Yep.
that. I've seen this in the past with Alan Aston and ESNet and so forth, and the attitude is if we do something good for the community and we put up some money, then it's your responsibility to put up some money too. From a philosophical point of view, I see where you're coming from. And yes, true, it will bring in some benefits. But I'm just not sure if the people had a say in that and if it's right to go take their money in advance. But I think what you're saying is the money is already accumulated somewhere. As a result, because of the taxes for like skiing
We
and
have a
things like that?
surplus in this account.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any additional public comment?
But you can't have any of it.
Harry?
I'm here as a citizen. Commission before you
Please
asked
state
me to...
this. We all know you, but state your name.
Gary Ratcliffe. Commission before you asked me to serve on a historic preservation committee. So I'd just like to make a general comment that we're all, it's not attempt to be a master of the obvious here, but I'm going to be a master of the obvious. I'm not pro gravel pit, I'm not pro orchard, I'm pro both. And long before the gravel pits were here, long before the fruit orchards were here.
What does that have to do with butterflies?
Yeah,
and that actually predates Bill Lee there.
Are you getting to butterflies?
What's that?
Are you talking about the Butterfly Museum?
No.
That's the item before us is the Butterfly Museum.
We're not on the... Okay, I apologize.
You wanted the general public
I apologize.
comment.
I thought there's a general public comment.
Okay. That's what I thought you were just,
I was waiting,
painting a broad
I was
historical
waiting for when
picture
you
for
saw
us.
the first chrysalis formed in Utah.
Well, we'll discuss that here in a minute.
Okay.
We'll get you on the general. This is public comment in relation to regular agenda item 13 concerning the butterfly biosphere. Any additional public comment on regular agenda 13? All right, I don't see any. We'll draw it back up here for any additional discussion.
I will make my statement that I've made in the past. I am not in favor of this, not that I'm not in favor of Thanksgiving Point and the good work they're doing there, or Butterfly Museum. But as I look down through the statute that was given to us on the TRCC, we have to realize that what they put that for was, we have tourism, we have facilities, we even have airports in there, we have convention centers, and that's how that tax was built. And just like Cabela's, where Cabela's is definitely a for-profit organization, the county wanted to contribute to that. And so they found a loophole, which is you can't really do it for tourism. It wasn't going for tourism dollars, because tourism dollars means you're putting billboards or signs. That's where the money's going towards. So the only way that they could really make this work was to say facilities. And so they went ahead and bought, they call it a condominium, but a piece of property within Cabela's, and the county buys this property, and therefore now it becomes a county facility. To me, that's circumventing what the intent of the law is, or the ordinance, or however you want to put that tax, and we're doing the same thing now when it comes to Thanksgiving Point's Butterfly Biosphere. We do have a board that advises us on this. It was extremely confrontational, probably the most confrontational meetings that I've sat through with, and they pointed out, because they've been here longer than I have, and they said, well, wait a second, we are giving hundreds of thousands of dollars even today, still, in essence, to Thanksgiving Point for their Museum of Curiosity today. Hundreds of thousands till 2030, 33, in which we're paying for the Museum of Curiosity through the bonding mechanism. And yet they remember, and I'm going off their memory, not mine, they remember Thanksgiving Point saying, now that we have this Museum of Curiosity, they did the same thing. The county purchased the property so that it could technically be a facility in which, who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want that as a business? Think about that. Let's have the county come in and buy some property for you so that you can therefore promote your business and say, hey, it's all in the name of tourism, but it's not in the name of tourism, because the tourism dollars go to tourism uses. This is in the name of a facility. The facility has to be owned by a public entity. And our tax and advisory board, they were, again, as I counted the ones that were for and against, we never really ranked them back then. We should have been, but we didn't. And we didn't do some of those processes probably the proper way. But nevertheless, we had some pretty strong conversation. I can't, in good conscience, I voted against it before. It comes up now as a change. It has to come before us one more time. And I get a sense of where it will go again on a contract basis. But how can I look at that law and say, okay, take the tourism off. This is not a tourism dollars that are going towards it. This is a facility. We're buying the land so that we can claim it as a public facility. Again, that doesn't make any sense to me. I think that we need to reevaluate how we go down through this, or every single business out there that touches and says, I've got a little bit of tourism that come this direction. Therefore, you need to start giving $1 million here or $500,000 there back to us so that we can have this once again and move it forward. And I'll be voting no on this. There's whatever it was, $285,000 a year. I think it's $285 that we're already paying. Now, Thanksgiving Point doesn't see that because it's a bond, but we will and will continue to be paying this.
Yeah, but that's not their fault. That's shame on the previous commission for not just expending the funds if they were going to do it.
It was $4 million. By the time we're done, it's $6 million. $6 million that is going towards the Museum of Curiosity. Now we're looking at another $2 million, and we're going around the intent of the law on this, I wish the legislature, somebody would change that and say, if it's gonna be in private, you know, if it's gonna be a public facility, that it actually has to be owned, with the intent of being indefinite as a public facility. You know, not that we can circumvent the law on this, and I don't know where we stop. You know, where do we stop with this? Cabela's, Thanksgiving Point, who's the next one to come and say, public facility, buy the land, so I can call it a public facility, so I can give you $2 million. That's, anyway.
Well,
That's
the
where
state
I'm
has
at.
given $1.5 million. Talking to all the legislators that I talked to, they do think that this is the intended use for it. I do think that they need to clean up the language. You know, I'm not disagreeing with that, but the state's giving money. We are the last money in, and quite honestly, I'm in way support of this. I feel like poor Mike, I beat him up because the original agreement asked for only a certain amount of protection for education and field trips, and I held out to make sure we did protect the youth because that was so important to me. And we got a longer years and more protection for the youth, more field trips, more educational opportunities for our youth. And I can't think of a better way to spend recreation tourism money than educating the youth of Utah County on what's going on in here. And at the same time, the difference with this fund is it doesn't always have to be for stuff that refills the pot, if you will. But in this case, Thanksgiving Point has a tremendous track record. I don't know if everybody getting off of the Lehigh exit in I-15 would always think that the growth up there is such a great thing, but I'm in big support. You know, I remember the inception of this. Right when Commissioner Lee and I came into office, we were all invited, our families, and we went up. We had no idea actually what we were going for. And they introduced kind of this concept and talked to people. And so having been involved to see their process and how they go through this, I couldn't be more supportive of the great work that those people are doing up there and what a great asset they are to Utah County. Unfortunately for us and for them, they're almost in Salt Lake County. And so Salt Lake County is a huge user of theirs, and that's why the state steps in. Unfortunately the unfortunate part for us is because they're in Utah County, we can't use Salt Lake County tax funds. And so, yeah, in this case, maybe we're giving more than even they would agree if they could split it between percentage-wise of use. I don't think that they would disagree with that use, but, you know, there is a boundary, and they are ours, and we reap 100% of their benefit. Whether they drive in from Salt Lake County, Idaho, whatever, they have a great track record. So I couldn't be in more support. So if we're ready for
How
motion.
much money are you gonna give to Evermore or Void? I mean, they're trying to build there, and,
Sure,
you know,
but
where do we go?
Well, but at the same point, I sit here and watch the governor
$1
and his staff fall all over themselves to try and land the Amazon, the second Amazon base. And to me, what's the difference? There isn't a difference. The difference here in this case is you have a Utah County resident who has made good to try and educate the youth and provide family-friendly activities in Utah County. Yes, he makes money, but he also gives back to the community. And I don't know how you equate how much tax money for educating children. I can't make that because, quite honestly, I'm an educator and I'm a father. And so those two things to me are so important. And this isn't because I get free passes. I have been a paying member for my family membership for a pass to Thanksgiving Point for several years, and we love it. We love it. The education opportunities. I've watched my now 4-year-old. You watch her, and most people see her, and they're like, "Well, gosh, she acts like she's 6 or 7. Is she in 1st or 2nd grade?" She's not. She's still in preschool, and the reason is because we go to the Curiosity Museum, we expand our mind, we go and do those things that are up there that help, that if parents would do for their kids at an affordable price or even for free with their schools. They have all sorts of scholarship opportunities, and if parents want their kids to go there, that's all they need to do is talk to them about it. So,
well, you're mixing the issues because you're taking on an emotional side with education or tourism. But this is a facility, and that's
again,
what we're looking
I'm not
at.
in disagreement
We're
with you.
We're
in how
looking
the
at
law
a
was
facility with it. I mean, we don't look at our parks and recs or a facility that's built by the city and turn right around and say, how much tourism we're getting.
I
out of
would
that.
love nothing more to give them $2 million outright and not own a piece of land. And I'll bet you he would like the same.
They can't do that.
Right. So again,
because we have to skirt the law.
So-
we have to skirt it.
No, it's
so that
not
we can
skirting
get
the
there.
law. The state does. So why don't we move for a legislative fix? And guess what? I'll be the first person if the legislature passes that and gives it to us effective June 1st. Mike, you can come back and I will be a vote to give you your land so the county doesn't own land on Thanksgiving Point. Because I agree, the county shouldn't be in that business. But it is an avenue in which we have. The problem is that I've seen with the TRCC and the TRT collection under the time that we've been here is that pot collects roughly $14 million a year. There's not an exact of who does what. We never break it down that way. But as far as recreation and tourism businesses that directly impact Thanksgiving Point, if they're not number one, because Sundance, I don't know the correlation, but it's either Sundance or Thanksgiving Point. It's got to be one or the other. And the reality is when Chad Linebaugh comes down here and says, well, would you give to Sundance? I would. We're collecting $14 million out of that a year off of the backs of people coming in or using extra income. So if you go to a restaurant, that extra little tax goes to pay for all these fun activities for you. Not on property tax. It's not taking out of our educators fund. It's not out of any of that. And the reality is we are not even coming close. We are collecting in surplus and trying to hold this crazy standard. In fact, we are going to close the Peaks Ice Arena because we don't want to fund $170,000 out of this fund at which we're collecting $14 million.
Nobody's closing the Peaks Ice Arena.
No, my point is that was our proposal months ago to potentially sell, excuse me, not, I did say close, I meant sell.
There's a difference
Yes,
there.
but where we have $170,000 out of a $14 million pot. And last year out of the $14 million, I'm pretty sure we didn't even exceed $3 million in extra expenses other than the bond payment on the convention center. That's why I support these things, because that's what it's supposed to be for, is to do things that uplift and uprich our community so that they can come back, stay here, whatever, and bring people in to create and drive hotel room visits and everything like that.
I wouldn't have had a problem at all if we'd have looked at this in the tourism or promotion of tourism, because I think that's appropriate. If that would have been the application, and we'd have been looking at billboards, have been looking at outside entities in the way of promoting this thing, totally falls within that parameter. But
we did. When they first came in, we went back to
it's a facility.
Commissioner Gregg, please let Commissioner Lee finish.
It's a facility. This was done under the facility. That's the only way to go after. Because our board, if we would have said, oh, we're going to do $2 million in promotion, they'd just say, okay, how and where and how is this going to happen? That's the reason why it's done under a facility, because you can go after a bigger pot of money, and that's part of the concern I have with it. If we're doing under promotion of tourism, and this is the ads we're going to buy, this is the billboards that are going to happen, those are totally legit, and that's exactly what it's set up to look at and what it's supposed to do. But when we start mixing tourism and facility, that's where I personally think we're crossing the line, buying property so we can say it's a public facility, when it's not really a public facility. I mean, that's all paperwork, and you and I both know, Greg, that when Cabela's was finished with they were supposed to turn it back to us, that piece of property, after they have ran through their process so it gets back on the tax rolls. They didn't. Why didn't they? Because there's no need to. They can keep it tax-free as long as we don't ever keep our eye on it. And we were the ones that had to initiate it back and say, wait a second, this is long overdue. Let's get it back onto the tax rolls.
Sure, but here's the problem I have with this. We are being completely disingenuous. When they came and made their first presentation to the TRCC board, TRT board, whatever, TAT board, Tourism and Tax Advisory Board, the very first thing that I know, I went and met with Mike, and at the time he had another person working for him that's no longer there, but I went and met with them and said, I would like to see how much you spend on advertising and from where. Where do you bring in these people, and how many people come into the Curiosity Museum? And it was all tourism driven. I understand the mechanism for the facility. I understand. And again, I'd like to see a legislative fix on that too, because I don't think the county should have to own it. They don't think the county should have to own it. But again, it's the avenue in which it's there. But the reality is this was always about educating the youth and tourism and driving in visits, or butts in beds, if you will, which was the exact phrase we used, into Utah County. That's what this is about for me, and I am very happy about it.
You'd feel the same way with Cabela's.
I wasn't here for Cabela's. Again,
No,
I
but
was
it's the same
I was
concept.
offended by, like you were, when I'm like, wait, why do we even own that? I was more offended because the day you come into office, they don't tell you about all these other deals. And so I didn't understand it. I don't know why we did, but at the same time, I've watched us give money to, by not collecting taxes to a farm down in southern Utah, so they keep their corporate offices here. I watched us do it to doTERRA in Pleasant Grove. We do it all the time. We can call it whatever it is. We did it for this building over here. We forego future taxes to have all these things. I don't know what the difference is between collecting. I mean, the difference is you just have a strong opinion on it. That's fine. But to me, it's all the same. Whether you're foregoing future taxes or you're using funds already here. The difference is that I love about this one versus the Curiosity Museum is the fact that because we have the money, we are not bonding, and we are giving this as a straight purchase. But by waiting and doing all those things, they've had to increase more money and more money and more money. We have protected and done everything we can. We've protected the youth. We're the last money in. We've followed the law to the letter of the law on this thing.
I'll make just a quick comment on this one, particularly for me, and then we can move to a motion. I feel like the commission made a commitment to Thanksgiving Point. There was a technicality that's brought this back before us, that they've moved forward and acted in full faith of the county fulfilling their commitment, and I feel that it's appropriate to fulfill the commitment that I feel like the county made. I have some problems personally with where this one's at, but I do feel that the county made a commitment and that I have a responsibility to keep the commitment that we made to them. That's where I'm at on this one.
Okay, I will move then that we approve regular agenda item 13.
Second it for the vote.
I have a motion and a second to approve regular agenda item number 13. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries 2-1. Commissioner Graves, Commissioner Ivey in the affirmative, Commissioner Lee in the negative. Looking at closed meetings, we do not need 15 or 16. We do 17 and 18.
I'll make a motion that we.
15 we do.
Oh,
we do?
We do?
But not 16.
Okay, well,
Make a motion that we strike number 16 on our regular agenda.
Second.
A motion and a second to strike regular agenda item number 16. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Carries 3-0.
I'll make a motion that we approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting for a strategy session to discuss the purchase, exchange, release of real property, water rights, or water shares at this location following the completion of our regular agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting as stated in regular agenda item 15. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 3-0.
I'll make a motion that we approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical and mental health of an individual or individuals at this location following the completion of our regular agenda.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting as stated in regular agenda item number 17. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 3-0.
I'll make a motion that we approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting to discuss the pending or reasonable imminent litigation at today's date of this location following the completion of our regular agenda.
Second.
Got a motion and a second to approve and set a date, time, and location for a closed meeting as stated in regular agenda item number 18. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 3-0. This time, we would open the podium for general public comment.
Here you go, Gary.
Okay, I'll make this brief. You asked me to serve a number of years ago on the Historic Preservation Committee. And, you know, it's been an eye-opener to me what this committee does. I had the thought when I initially asked to be on that board that it dealt strictly with old buildings, the preservation of old buildings and sites that way, but it's much more than that. We've spent the last few weeks talking about orchards and gravel pits and those kinds of things, and just wanted to make mention that long before those things were even a thought in anybody's heads, the Native Americans lived here. We share some of their culture out there on West Mountain. I'm into old historic things, as you well know, and I think old relics, old Indian writings can coexist with gravel pits. It might mean that gravel pit operators may have to bend on what they can excavate and where they can excavate. I've always been a proponent as a land surveyor on property rights and people being able to do with their land what they want to do. And I understand that this board has no authority to tell the BLM what they can or cannot do on federal land. Just like you can't tell the state of Utah what they cannot do on state land, you can't tell a private property owner to a certain extent, although we do have planning laws. But I do know that that this board here has at least some influence, albeit minimal, maybe on what could happen out there with some of those mining operations when it comes to rock art. I've really think that, well, I know once some of those things are gone, they're gone. We don't get them back. So I think now's the time. I think some of that damage is already beyond repair. I think the BLM has already had dialogue with some of those mining operators out there on future expansion, and so I think that discussion's already has taken place or will be taking place. I don't know about the state of Utah or what damages or what rock art may exist on state or private land, respectively. But I just encourage this group to take a proactive look at that. I understand the need for the mining. I really do. We've got to have that, and there are only limited possibilities for that as a resource. But I think it can coexist with a lot of those artifacts that do exist. Because, like I said, once it's gone, it's gone. We don't get that back. So, anyway, appreciate your time.
It's against federal law to do anything against that. That rock art.
That antiquities or whatever they call it. Yep.
And so, when I read down through that report, they did their archaeological study before, and now there's been new sites found, and so John Bowes from Dogma, they're asking them to redo it again, and I think that's appropriate, especially if it's been found and the citizens have found rock art up in that area, to go back down through that so that it is not destroyed.
Yeah, well, that's definitely a positive step. There's also this. We're trying to develop a shooting range over there on Lake Mountain, and part of the rock art, as Commissioner Graves made comments to earlier, there's a lot of that rock art that's being destroyed, not by the gravel pit operators, just by citizens going out there and shooting. So I think that's another thing that this board can do. Well, I know we've acquired...
Especially over there.
Okay. But we need to, it takes resources to build a shooting range with restroom facilities and those kinds of things. So I know we're in the process of that, but it all takes money. And so I think the sooner those kinds of things are done, the better.
I mean, we saw, I don't know if Commissioner Ivey was in, but we saw the top secret map of rock art over there. Did you see that too? Okay. I mean, they came in and they were making sure that everything was, because they wanted to show us where all those resources were, and over there on Lake Mountain, and that's the reason why the shooting range is where it's at, and what we're trying to do over there with that land is to help protect those areas that has that coastal resource.
Sure, and I'm sure the sheriff would be happy too to not have to manage, so much area of vandalism and.
The sheriff ever happy?
Well,
he is.
This would definitely lighten his load a little bit.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying, commissioners, in so many words, we just need to keep taking a proactive approach that direction. And as soon as we can get that shooting range developed, whether it takes more resources monetarily to do so, let's get it done.
Now, don't bring up a bad sore spot there.
Thank you. Any additional public comment?
I didn't know we were talking about this subject, so if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to speak again and introduce myself. I'm Todd Cusick with CMC, and I was just introduced to Mr. Ackerson with the Utah Rock Art Association, a research association outside. I think he had the assumption that I'm somehow out blowing up rock art or shooting at it or something. And I just want to address the subject that Gary, right? Gary has addressed here. On our property over on West Mountain, I have no problem with whoever wants to come, and I invited him to come and do whatever research he wants. I have a lot of experience with this. I started the largest EIS in the history of Utah for preservation of these types of things in Nine Mile Canyon in 1999. Spent 11 years doing this. I was the guy who actually routed the road around the Hunter Panel, which is the most famous piece of rock art in Utah, or maybe even the country. That was about 2002. And I'm very sensitive to that. I have no problem with, coming out on our property and come and see whatever you want. And if there's something there, there's got to be a way to deal with it. And generally with what we're doing, there wouldn't be a compatibility issue. There's ways to work around that. Just one other comment. Despite my best artistic efforts of staying up late last night with salt dough, I think I confused Commissioner Lee. I would just invite any of you, it might be better to come to my property and I'll show you the line issue that I think I confused you with, or afterwards.
Oh, I would love to have conversation with you on that.
Or afterwards, maybe I should get that back. I know I said put it in your showcase outside, or well, okay, there it is right there. I'd like to show you that because it's a real simple issue that I think it can be solved, and it might just be a text change somewhere. That would make that a non-issue, and that's really the only issue I have with what you're dealing with here on this. But it is it's a physical issue you can't get around by looking at my agreement with the county, and ultimately it's going to look really, really silly someday, and there's a way to fix that. And then I'll just show you later if you have just a moment.
Any additional general public comment? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and move into our close. Was there more? Oh.
Robert Stevens, Provo, Utah. So Brandon Larson, in my opinion, is a perfect example of a county employee who is good. When I go in there and I ask him a question, he's there to help. He shows me where in the code it says this or that, and it's his job to obey the code. The health department isn't like this. The health department, I've asked them over and over again, show me where in the code it authorizes you to do this, and they won't respond. I asked them for the process of water monitoring, and I even went and prepared a document, and I said, under Lanty, he used to be in charge of the health department, this is how he did it. Is this still how you did it? And they refused to respond. In business, you ask yourself, would you be displeased if you fired an employee? And in this situation, I would not be displeased if we fired the health department and turned it over to the free market, where they can offer the best sort of service for the best amount of money, or least amount of money, I should say, right?
Hold on. When you say the health department,
well,
so you honestly think private
services.
industry is going to come in here, find a way to hurry and take care of our public health crisis with the Hep A virus or the measles virus? Or I understand you're frustrated with a water quality testing, but the reality is the health department is a very large organization that serves this county really, really well.
I'd like to qualify that. I made a mistake. I meant services that citizens have to pay for from the health department, which services would easily be something that private engineers would be able to go do the same for a better service for, a price that is competitive.
Well, I got beat up already for suggesting that privatization model.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. A couple of us took a trip to looking at things like that, and man, you make a lot of people in this building nervous.
What's the update on that then? Is it okay if we talk about that at some point? You don't have to talk about it right now if you don't want to, but I'd really like to understand that. if there was an onslaught to the health department right now for applications for monitoring of water and PERC and, and so forth, they wouldn't be able to handle it. And without, a document saying, here's the process, here's the regulations, we're left in the dark. The form of government where the officials aren't responsible, aren't accountable, and aren't open with what they do is not the form of government that was established here in America. I'm honest, I'm truthful, I would abide to the science and so forth, but I asked for the science and they just refused to go talk about it. And so, and to make matters worse, they go stick their lawyers on me. And they tell their employees, don't let Mr. Stevens speak with you about this issue unless you go through me first. And the employees have told me that. And so it's just not a good situation, and it's hostile. And so I think this is a great example. What are the services? Are there engineers who can do these services? What can we do for checks and balances? Is it like true science or is it not true science? In many situations, all I got to do is take a soil sample and have it analyzed. And I've offered that, and they go, nope, we're not interested in having you do that, or they're not interested in changing any kind of result. So it'd be nice if this was all thought through and addressed in the future. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. All right, any additional public comment? All right, seeing none, we'll go ahead and move into our closed meetings. Thank you for your attendance.
Renee, you're gonna have to call me. I got to be. You're gonna have to call me when they're ready to come back in for the closed.